Penn State is not overrated. And if I'm being honest, they're still being underrated.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. My name is Zach Seyko. I am your host of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. I feel like to an extent, Penn State is still being underrated. Everyone's saying that they're overrated because of this number 3 ranking in the AP Top 25 in the coaches poll. And I'm here to say that it's justified. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. I'd really appreciate it if you're part of the conversation too here. Is Penn State underrated or overrated? Number 3, the number 3 ranking is justified. That is the right spot. And I'll tell you why I think Georgia should be ahead of them. But I will see a good amount of people, maybe random media accounts that will try to be controversial and rank Penn State at 8 or 9. And if you have them outside of the top 10, you're just downright crazy and you're not here to talk college football. I know that for a fact. The number 3 ranking for Penn State is correct. They're undefeated. They have 2 true road wins outright. They dominated West Virginia, and they won a close one against USC. And I'll talk about USC a little more in a second here. And they also had that top 20 victory at home against a very formidable Illinois team as they just beat Michigan convincingly. But as the season continues to march on, West Virginia does not look as good as they were supposed to be in the preseason. Clearly, maybe they're having fun, or maybe everyone hopes they're having fun, but they are clearly not as good as the preseason chatter indicated. That was a sleeper playoff contender and Heisman contender Garrett Green, and now they want to fire their coach as soon as possible. And then USC, the tires have really fallen off on USC here. I understand the loss to Maryland, though. I was not shocked at all by the loss to Maryland. I was kind of anticipating it because this is a team. A week ago, Penn State just ended your college football playoff hopes. And then you got to fly across the country after you lose that game in overtime at home by 3 points. A game that you were winning 20-6, and Penn State ended your college football playoff dreams. And then, don't get me wrong, I think USC is the better team. I think they got caught in an unfavorable spot. These are college student athletes, may I remind you, not pros. There is still an element of amateurism here. They're flying across the country after their season goals had been shattered, and they have to play a Maryland team that just lost 37-10 to Northwestern. Maryland still has its season goals ahead of them. USC does not. So I'm not surprised that the Terrapins actually won that game. But USC should have closed out that game. They should have won because they were leading by a good amount of points, but they didn't. And that is an unacceptable loss because I know for a fact that USC team is more talented and better than Maryland. But at the end of the day, a win is a win. But I still value these Penn State wins for West Virginia and USC fairly high. They were both on the road. They dominated West Virginia 34-12. After that first quarter, it was smooth sailing for Penn State. West Virginia had no answer. And I do think people are going to really look past this USC team. Are they as good as maybe they were considered in the preseason? Absolutely not. That's not the case. Some injuries here and there. And I just think the ball bounces a couple of different ways for USC. They lose a close one to Michigan on the road. They lose a close one to Minnesota on the road. They lose a close one to Maryland on the road. They dominated Wisconsin, who we're going to talk about in the second segment here. I just think USC just had an unfavorable way of going through the schedule. But those are 2 quality road victories. You can't just look past them. Well, West Virginia struggled in this matchup. USC is having a tough time on the road. That doesn't take away from the wins that Penn State had on the road against a Mountaineer or a Trojan team. Again, they still beat a top 20 team, a top 20 Illinois team that is proving to be better and better, and by 2 touchdowns. Now, here's where Penn State's undefeated, so they're kind of the ones that are the last standing across the country because some favorable teams, some really talented teams have one loss to this point. I mean, Georgia at number 2. That makes sense to me. But when I look at this Penn State team, they have a top 10 offense. They have a top 15 defense. It's moved down since that game, according to PFF. So the analytics have Penn State as a top 10, top 15 defense. And then yards per play. Yards per play are allowed. Probably one of the most important stat categories when it comes to football across the board. Both of them are top 10 in the nation. So Penn State has a pretty consistent, on average, top 10 offense and defense together. And preseason, the goalposts just kind of continue to move because now the conversation is, well, they're good, but they're still not great. They shouldn't be in the top 4. They haven't beaten anybody. Preseason, a decent amount of people said they would lose to West Virginia. They'd lose to USC. They'd go 7-5, 8-4. Now, myself included on that USC game, but as we looked it over again the week leading up to it, we changed our minds here on this show, right? Some people tried this. The same people that are trying to argue now that Penn State does not belong in this inside of the top 4 of the AP or the coaches poll are the same people that probably tried to say that this was a 7-5 or an 8-4 team. So the goalposts are moving. Just again, they're good. They're not great. Penn State can absolutely go 12-0 here if they really want to. It's safe to say that they're going to go 11-1 because they're going to be favored in all of those remaining games except Ohio State, and to an extent. We'll see how everything plays out here with another game in front of, Ohio State has to play Nebraska. I think they win that game. I'm not trying to imply anything here, but the initial spread was 4.5 in favor of Ohio State. The way people are talking generally around Penn State, it makes it seem like it's a 10-point or a 14-point spread, and that's just not the case. Vegas absolutely thinks that Penn State and Ohio State is going to be a close game. Ohio State's the favorite by 4 points, but that's clearly supposed to be a close game, and anything can happen in college football on any given Saturday, on any given Sunday. That's why the saying is what it is. Penn State can go 12-0. They can be a top 4 college football playoff team. They can get to the Big Ten title game. They control their own destiny. That is the most important part. Winning those games against West Virginia, USC, that puts you in control of your own destiny. Now let's talk about Georgia, because I keep saying that it's justified for Penn State to be the number 3 team in the country, but shouldn't they be number 2? Are they still being underrated in that regard that, well, Texas lost, so that means Oregon and Penn State should naturally move up to the next couple of spots. In years past, I think that would be the case. In years past, I really do think Penn State would be the number 2 team in the country, but not in this modern age. Rankings are a little bit different. You have the College Football Playoff Committee that's going to do all of its analytics and run through and rank the teams. But Penn State at number 3, it is acceptable. That is okay that Georgia is at number 2. They went into Texas. They barely lost to Alabama. I know that was a blowout at first, but they came all the way back, and honestly, they should have won that game, but Alabama had some magic, I guess. Georgia left all of that to put all of that to rest, gave Texas no second chances, won that game convincingly in Texas, in Austin. So yes, they can have the number 2 ranking by all means. I think that's fair. I think that's correct. But Penn State at number 3, that's where I would keep the Nittany Lions with all of that happening this past weekend for college football. Wisconsin, though, Penn State opened as an 11.5 point favorite, and that spread has moved in the favor of who exactly? We'll talk about the Badgers and why Penn State has a favorable matchup against this Wisconsin team on the other side of this break. And today's episode is brought to you by ZBiotics. ZBiotics Pre Alcohol Probiotic Drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink alcohol, it gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It is this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break down this byproduct. Just remember to make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and then you'll feel your best tomorrow. Here's how to use it. Step 1, drink pre-alcohol. For the best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly. Pace yourself, hydrate, get a good night's sleep. Step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use LockedOnCollege at checkout. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they will refund you your money, no questions asked. Remember to head over to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege and use promo code LockedOnCollege at checkout for 15% off. And today's episode is also brought to you by Team Ticker. That right there behind me to my left is a Team Ticker sign, and I'm going to do an excellent job to describe it here for my audio listeners. Team Ticker is the one-of-a-kind sports sign for college sports fans. Team Ticker is a 1.5 by 2 foot wall sign featuring the Nittany Lion logo that has a cool retro-looking LED display. The display is updated daily with fresh content, such as a countdown to the next game, schedule, standings, stats, and news, and it's a super fun and great way to stay connected with your favorite Penn State sports teams, whether it's football, men's basketball, women's basketball, baseball, soccer, softball. Team Ticker has got you covered. And you can use the content control section to customize it. It's a mobile app that allows you to control the sports that you see with the remote control function, and it's always going to allow you to jump directly to any section of the content, so you have complete and total control for these updates. Team Ticker is the ultimate addition to your Nittany Lions sports collection. Once you hang it on the wall, it's going to be the talk of all your fellow Penn State sports fans. If you're looking for that one eye-catching item to showcase your team pride or a gift for that special Nittany Lions fan, go to teamticker.com and pick up your Team Ticker today. Team Ticker is the one-of-a-kind sports sign, and you get a discount here. Go to teamticker.com and use promo code LOCKEDON to receive $50 off your Team Ticker purchase. That's teamticker.com, promo code LOCKEDON for $50 off your Team Ticker purchase. The first available lines for Penn State and Wisconsin, the spread was 11.5 points in favor of Penn State. And now on FanDuel, it's gone to 6.5. So now Penn State's lost 5 points on the spread here to this point, even after opening at 11.5. If some of you remember that FanDuel ad read and talked about the early spread, 5 points the other way. So the Sharps or whoever moving the market have said that Penn State is only a touchdown favorite and not a double-digit favorite here. To address Wisconsin directly, this is a second half of the season type of team. I think Wisconsin is peaking at the right time. I'm fairly impressed with what they've done. Now, a recent game against Northwestern, right? That's a 23-3 victory. It wasn't overly dominant, caught a good amount of that game, but they got the job done. You hold a team to 3 points, your defense is doing something right. I still think Wisconsin is in the process of getting better and better, day by day, game by game. Luke Fickell led Cincinnati to a college football playoff once upon a time. I'm not saying that Wisconsin's a college football playoff team, but Luke Fickell knows how to coach college football. He's in year 3. This program is starting to turn the corner, I think, overall here at this point. I somewhat wanted to write this team off and say that maybe Wisconsin isn't as tough as people might give them credit for, especially since they lost Tyler Van Dyke to an unfortunate season-ending injury. And then running back Chez Mellusi running back number 1, decided to opt out and enter the transfer portal before the season so that he could preserve his extra eligibility. But now the current quarterback and running back that have taken over for Van Dyke and Mellusi, Braden Locke and Tawee Walker, might be better than both of them. Wisconsin, generally speaking, has a top 35 defense. And to start the season, ESPN's analytics had them inside the top 10 for the preseason. So Wisconsin's defense is definitely its asset. But Luke Fickell, I think, being an offensive coach, there's kind of that misconception floating around that Wisconsin is 3, 4, 5 yards in a cloud of dust. They're certainly running the ball more because Walker's insanely talented, and they had Chez Mellusi. The better part of their offense is the ground game, but this is kind of that spread, air raid, Luke Fickell offense that he is installing at Wisconsin. Don't think it's the days of old where it's Paul Chryst. We're going to have 7, 8 offensive linemen. And remember, Brett Bielema was the head coach of Wisconsin too. Those teams are gone. They're elsewhere, right? Paul Chryst was fired by Wisconsin in the middle of the season. They went and got Luke Fickell. And Brett Bielema's over at Illinois. And to an extent, he's kind of changed his game plan to fit the modern age of college football. But Wisconsin is not that anymore. That's the misconception that I want to get out of the way. Wisconsin's defense is the better of the two sides, defense versus offense. But I think the offense is continually getting better. It's like Penn State. I think the better days are ahead for Penn State's offense and defense. The same respect can be given to Wisconsin as well. Camp Randall is always going to be a tough environment. It's a night game. That's a 7:30 kickoff. I look at this matchup overall, and it's tough for me to find a head-to-head matchup. So talk about the good of Wisconsin, but the head-to-head matchups when I compare, okay, quarterback to quarterback, running back to running back, wide receivers to wide receivers, you get my point? Across the board, Penn State wins all of those. Better quarterback, better running back room, better wide receiver room, better tight ends. Tyler Warren, best tight end in the country. Offensive line, defensive line, linebackers, defensive backs. You know what? I'll give Wisconsin special teams. I have my concerns about Penn State for its special teams. Riley Thompson's been okay. Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen not doing much in the kick return game. Punt returner, Penn State's just happy to have somebody field a punt and not turn the football over with Caden Saunders dealing with bumps and bruises. So I will give Wisconsin the edge when it comes to special teams. Third side of the football is extremely important here, but it's not as important when you're winning all of the other head-to-head position battles here for Penn State. I also do want to point out, because how do we get a measuring stick to compare Penn State to Wisconsin? They have only one common opponent, and that's USC. Penn State went on the road and defeated USC 33-30. Wisconsin did the exact same thing. They went out to USC and they lost 38-21. Now, Wisconsin did build a lead against them, but they didn't have enough in the gas tank to finish off USC. Interestingly enough, because I get done talking about how USC is more of a first half team and pointing out that, hey, they build leads, they can't really preserve them here. Maryland, Penn State, right? Minnesota, other than Michigan and Wisconsin, they were playing from behind. But there's your common opponent. Wisconsin loses by 17. Penn State wins by 3. But they're on a little bit of a winning streak here. You want to talk about weak competition. Wisconsin's beaten Purdue 52-6. They've beaten Rutgers, and Rutgers, I think, was overrated to start the season, but now as injuries have piled up, they don't really have as much of an identity, or they have to move away from the identity that they were going to go with. Physical ground game, physical defense. Defense isn't really helping anybody out. I thought UCLA was going to win that game because I liked what I've seen from UCLA as of late, and Rutgers just isn't living up to expectations here. And then Wisconsin beats a Northwestern team that, of course, coached by David Braun, is going to have a good defense, but no semblance of an offense. You can't play any complimentary football. Overall, your team's not going to be very good. So Wisconsin's racking up wins that I think are playing a little too much into their favor, and it's kind of distracting people from, okay, Wisconsin's a solid team. I think they are peaking at the right point of the season, but wins against Purdue, a banged-up Rutgers team, and a Northwestern team with no offense doesn't impress me that much. I think they have some good players, but I think it's really condensed to just a couple of players. Braden Locke is a solid quarterback. He's fine, but he can't take over a game. If Penn State's able to build a lead, and that's going to be the goal, Penn State's going to try to build that 2-score, 3-score type of lead, and then just run out the clock. Because this is a road game. It's going to be a tough environment. So you have to score quickly, take the crowd out of it. But Wisconsin is not a team that can play from behind. Even though they are installing that air raid offense, I don't know that Luke Fickell has all of the players that he wants to fully execute that system that he needs there. So Wisconsin's relying on Atawi Walker, a good solid defense, a team that hasn't lived up to expectations yet, a defense that hasn't lived up to expectations yet. But I look at this as Penn State should win this game at first glance here. For the eye test, we'll go deeper into it. We'll have more game previews, special guests to talk about it more in depth. But I like this spread for Penn State at 7 points. I think Penn State will cover that, and I think they will win. I think they will win convincingly enough before they head into Ohio State. So those are early thoughts on Wisconsin. I can't see my opinion changing all that much more as we dive deeper into it, but we'll get a better look at it throughout the week. Penn State versus Wisconsin. Now, bye week behind Penn State. Second half of the season in front of them, 6 more games here. There are some breakout players. Now, I know I've said that the offense and defense overall are going to continue to excel and get better, but who are those specific players to keep an eye on? Well, I'll tell you about them on the other side of this break. And today's show is brought to you by Game Time. You got to download the Game Time app because buying tickets to your favorite events should not be stressful. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier than before. Game Time Picks filters out all of the fluff and only shows you incredible deals on incredible seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. And let's look at those tickets on Game Time. So I have Penn State versus Wisconsin pulled up in front of me, tickets in front of me here via Game Time. If you want a super deal, all the top deals are sorted for me. Super deal listed on Game Time, all in pricing, so there's no surprise fees at checkouts. 2 tickets, $158 a piece, upper deck sideline, section FF, row 14. If you're looking for the lowest price for tickets to this Penn State-Wisconsin game, $137 a piece, all in pricing, section II, row 14. That's still upper deck sideline. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use promo code LockedOnCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create that account. Use promo code LockedOnCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. When it comes to second half breakout players, I really think you could pick anyone because I keep saying the offense and the defense are going to get better. Andy Kotelnicki's system is complicated. Tom Allen's system is complicated. There are big changes from last year's team to this year's team, and it's going to take time to settle into that. So Penn State's had the results that they've had. That's good. The fact they're undefeated, and that means they're only going to get better. So Penn State's offense putting up 30 plus points, 30 plus points, 30 plus points. At this point, at this stage of the season, they've looked really good in the second half of games. All of that's going to be cleaned up. I mean, you really could pick anybody on this team. You could say Drew Aller's going to get better because he will. I don't think we've seen the best football from Drew yet. The offensive line is continuing to build chemistry. I've been critical of the offensive line for good reason, but they are playing above expectations. However, that's a completely new offensive line aside from Sal Wormley as the returning starter. They need to get adjusted to one another. They will continue to build chemistry. The defense continues to make those second half adjustments. Andy Kotelnicki's doing the same offensively, but Tom Allen's group is kind of notorious for the second half adjustments here. Really, everybody points to him, and that's fair. Offense is doing the same thing, but defensively, the second half defenses have been night and day in comparison to one another for Tom Allen's group. Players specifically, I'll name a couple of offensive players before I actually name some other defensive players. Julian Fleming. I think Julian Fleming is a prime candidate for a second half breakout. Fleming and Aller, I talk about the chemistry in the offensive line. Those two need to build chemistry. Julian Fleming played football at Ohio State. It's not like he and Aller have been playing a lot of competitive football for a long time. No, they have to get used to each other's tendencies. They have to get on the same page. There's the only thing that I've seen between the two of them is miscommunication, timing issues. But look at who Drew targeted on that final drive late in the game in the fourth quarter to tie the game, to set up the game-tying touchdown and field extra point against USC. He wasn't going to Trey Wallace. He wasn't, to an extent, he wasn't going to Tyler Warren. On those fourth down plays, he was going to Julian Fleming. You use that bye week to perfect those little things, fix the miscommunication problems, but that's just it. Once Fleming and Aller get on the same page, I think that's going to be a reliable connection down the stretch, and something that I pointed to is like, hey, just give it time, allow them some time to figure it out, and then Aller to Fleming will be very reliable in the second half of the season. Another offensive player, again, there's a lot of guys that I could name. Steve Jones, when he was on the show as a special guest recently, named all of the wide receivers from Julian Fleming to Amari Evans. So the passing game as a whole is a group to watch for. Players specific, though, back to the offensive line, Cooper Cousins is a prime candidate here. True freshman, they said that they were going to burn his red shirt right out of the gate. I think Cooper Cousins is only going to get bigger, faster, stronger, smarter. The bye week helps with that. He's already been a player, a freshman that really has been seeing a significant amount of playing time. Cooper Cousins, I think, with the rotation on the offensive line, some guys are going to need some breaks here and there, but I think he will continue to live up to his potential in real time this freshman season of his, and will be impressive down the stretch and be a reliable, maybe. I don't know that he starts if there's somebody that's not available, but because he is a guard, but he can play center. He can play guard. In an emergency, he could play tackle if they really needed him to. He is insanely talented. He has all the potential in the world. There's already initial talks of him being a potential first-round pick when he graduates after his third season, when he is finished with his junior campaign. Cooper Cousins is a name to keep an eye on. Whether there are some injuries to the offensive line or not, Cooper Cousins, I think, is going to be a significant contributor down the stretch of the season. Flip it over to the defense. I feel like this might not sit right with some people because these are already star players on the defense. But give me Abdul Carter and Dani Dennis-Sutton, the pass rush. The pass rush. Abdul Carter making that position change now in back-to-back games for Abdul Carter. USC and UCLA, we've seen Carter's best performances. Illinois recently. So these past 3 games, we have seen Abdul Carter perform significantly better compared to his first ones. And that's because he needs time. So that's what I mean when you have to take time to settle in, get adjusted. You don't just learn playing defensive end overnight. Granted, Abdul Carter has been doing defensive end type of things during his time at Penn State as a linebacker. But the nuances of it, the little parts of the technique that you need to perfect, and doing it from a more of a full-time standpoint is something to get adjusted to. Give me Abdul Carter and Dani Dennis-Sutton, because I don't think Dani Dennis-Sutton has lived up to expectations to this point. He was my preseason prediction to lead the team in sacks because I anticipated Abdul Carter just having this hybrid role, being all over the place. Now Abdul Carter is still having that pass rush presence more often than not. Dani Dennis-Sutton, you have Zane Duran, who's already broken out in the first half of the season. That's why I think offenses are going to key in on Zane Duran a little bit more, and that's just going to open up lanes, avenues for Abdul Carter and Dani Dennis-Sutton to wreak havoc on the quarterback, and they're getting there. All the analytics, all the other metrics outside of the box score, you can't just read box scores. Abdul Carter and Dani Dennis-Sutton, per an analytic that says who's getting the closest to the quarterback without making a play, the two of them, both of them are in the top 5 of that metric. Abdul Carter and Dani Dennis-Sutton are both. Abdul Carter's number 1, Dani Dennis-Sutton is number 4. The last player that I want to name defensively, I could name a lot of players. I think better football's ahead for A.J. Harris, right? He has the ability to be elite. So he's played good. He's played very well, but I think he can be elite down the stretch. I will name Kobe King because I still feel like he is just being overlooked from the beginning of the season to this point now. Kobe King has really put together some incredible games. In that USC game, he had an exceptional game. Slow start to the season, though. I was a little critical of Kobe King and was wondering, okay, where is this? Because I thought he would be one of the better players on defense. It's taken him some time to settle in, but I think him being, wearing the green dot, being the captain of the defense out there on the football field, figuratively, right? He's getting the plays sent to him. Being the guy that's commanding the defense as that true Mike linebacker, I think now that Kobe King has settled in, he will be one of the better players down the stretch, and that's why I ranked him in terms of most valuable players. He was in my top 5 for Penn State in the preseason. Kobe King's going to live up to those expectations sooner rather than later. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Again, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Second half breakout players, your thoughts on Wisconsin, your scouting report, and is Penn State being overrated or underrated based on the latest AP and coaches poll ranking. If you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate it. And for more Penn State football and coverage around your favorite Penn State sports teams, keep it right here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen and watch, you get to check out Locked On Big Ten with host Craig Sheeman. Everything that's Big Ten related, he's covering it in the show. Penn State related news, talking Ohio State and Michigan, all the newcomers to the Big Ten, Oregon, Washington, UCLA, USC. There is not a stone that goes unturned when it comes to the Big Ten, and that's why it's called Locked On Big Ten with host Craig Sheeman. It's available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, and it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.